Hello guys, welcome again to another corn-fed production. Today we are going to be working on the Holley EFI on my Ranger behind me. And the caption of this video is a little bit of clickbait. It already has Holley EFI on it, but we're going over the system and how I set it up because I did it differently than what most people would, and what I'm going to now versus how it was set up before. So like I said, this truck already had Holley EFI. That's a Terminator X ECU right there to run my small block Ford in here. What made my system a little bit different was I wanted to use factory components. Most people that would run a small block Ford on a Terminator would use either the factory style TFI distributor, or they would go to LS coil packs or coil per cylinder on their engine. My engine came from an Explorer and had waste spark on it using these two coil packs. Each coil pack fires 4 cylinders. You have 4 inputs and it fires companion cylinders. Well, to make that work, I had to wire up a coil driver to where I only use 4 of my inputs for coils on that computer. What ends up happening is I run the first 4 of the firing order, and then companion cylinders light off at the same time, which means the cylinders that are on TDC at the same time fire every time they're at TDC. So for instance, you can see how these are labeled 1 and 6, 4 and 7, 8 and 2, 3 and 5. These cylinders fire at the same time. So when 1 is on compression, it fires. 6 is firing on exhaust. And then when 6 is on compression, it fires. 1 is on exhaust, it fires. And likewise with all the cylinders that are companions. This actually took a little bit of effort to get set up too, because I was talking to people from Holley, and Holley actually used to make a waste spark system. It was their coil packs though, and that's what my issue was. You see, the Ford coil packs are a dumb coil. They have to have enough power to feed them. You need a driver separate. The Holley computer doesn't have drivers in it. It just has your input. So that's where this guy comes into play. On your LS, you would have power and ground fed to your coil packs that are on each valve cover. You would have a dedicated power and ground ran to those when your ignition is switched on. What I have with this is I have it set up to where it receives power and ground from the factory harness on this Ranger, and then gives that power and ground to the coils. So the side that goes to my Holley ECU, it's only used to trigger this. It gets its actual power from the battery directly, not going through the ECU. Now on the factory Ford computer, you don't need that. It has drivers built in. So if I ran the stock Explorer harness and computer, I would have been all set. Trying to use the Holley, I had to buy that guy there. So if I already have this running and driving, what am I changing? Why am I changing it? Well, it boils down to, I want a little more performance and I want a little bit cleaner of a look. What I was running was a GT40 style intake manifold. These come stock on Explorers. Some of the Cobras had a intake very similar to this, a little bit better than this actually. But these are a good upgrade for your stock Fox body. A lot of people, guys, look for these in junkyards along with the GT40 heads as a quick upgrade. Well, the problem is with these intake manifolds, the lifter valley is right underneath them. So hot oil splashes underneath your intake runners and heats up this intake manifold along with your coolant passage right here, which heats up these front two. Not great for performance. It gets hot. Well, I did the most with what I could, and I have one on the truck already that you guys saw. That one's actually ported out a little bit to match the gaskets and for a little bit better flow. And I ported this upper to match, to get a little bit more flow out of it. But this is pretty big and massive, and I wasn't a huge fan of it. When you have this bolted together in the engine bay of a Ranger, it makes things rather tight. I did make it work with the factory TPS and IAC. It didn't idle very well though. And so I'm trying to swap to something to give it a little bit cleaner of a look, not have to run something to a air box off to the side that looks kind of funky. So here's my solution. I decided to go down the rabbit hole and spend even more money to get a single plane intake with your ports for your fuel injection, and then topped it with a 1000 CFM throttle body, which will handle way more air than this engine needs. But with it being an air gap style intake manifold and the air underneath it, it'll help keep it cooler, as well as this coolant passage doesn't run up against these runners. So it should be a better performing intake. I'll just be able to put air cleaner right on top of this, so I won't have to run an air box. Should be a little bit cleaner of a look. And then I'll be running Holley fuel rails, which I still have to get some of the AN lines and stuff to make this work. But it's a much simpler setup that'll clean up my engine bay a lot. Now, I'm not dissing the GT40 intake manifolds at all. Like I said, they're a known budget upgrade for Fox bodies. I just don't like how they fit underneath the hood. I think they're big, they're bulky, they're unnecessary. There is a guy, his name's Visored. He actually ported one where just the intake made it pick up 40 horsepower. He took and cut apart the upper intake to where he could port out the runners going down to the cylinder on both ends to smooth them out. He welded on to the runners on the lower intake so he could port them even further. So he had even bigger openings. And the thing picked up 40 horsepower. As well as he also added some stuff to make it kind of like the single plane that I got, where it's got that air gap, which, as far as I'm concerned, that guy is a wizard. That was way more time and effort than someone should have ever put into one of those intakes. But it was awesome to be able to see a dyno test like that, where people picked up crazy power with just some porting. Okay, so I got kind of lucky on that one. Intake came off without having to pull the thermostat housing off, and I also was able to do it without pulling the valve covers off. I was afraid this lip on the valve covers would hit and I'd have to pull the valve covers off, which the bolts on this side of this valve cover are a pain to get to. That, and right now this thing has cork gaskets, you can kind of see right there. So if I pulled them off, I wouldn't have been able to reuse those. I would have had to have gone and got another set, which would have set me back a little bit more. Both time and money. Not much money, more time. But now I'm going to grab the other intake and I'll set it on here to make sure that it fits okay. Once I know that it fits okay and it'll clear the hood and everything, I'll clean up these gasket surfaces and get them ready to bolt that intake on. Oh, is this one not going to clear the valve covers? Pretty sure this is about where I lose everyone's belief on that it's just a junkyard engine with valve covers and some paint. Turns out those valve covers might actually be needed to clear something. So it turns out that this intake actually interferes with the top of the cylinder head a little bit, and that's possible because these heads have been machined, might have taken the clearance down just a little too much for them. So what I'm gonna end up doing is I'll take a flat disc to the edge of the intake, just a little bit, should be enough just to get it to clear to go down. Hate that I have to do that on a brand new intake manifold, but all in the name of power, right? Okay, so I actually came to a conclusion. I might be porting this a little bit too. Not really a port, but a gasket match. I was looking at the old intake compared to this new one and grabbed my new gasket for comparison. And you can see that one's pretty well matched to the gasket. And this one here, well, not quite. So it's pretty hard to see, but it looks like there will be just enough clearance to put a round air cleaner on it. So mind the awful paint on this hood, but the hood does shut, and with it popped, you can just barely look through on the side of the hood. And it looks like it'll have enough clearance for a round air cleaner. So should be good with like a 2-inch round air cleaner on this. Should be plenty of air for it to breathe. Now it's just, I got to decide on whether I'm going to port that or not. We got all that goodness clearing the hood. Then, like I said, 2-inch round air cleaner on top of this should be plenty for it and should clear the hood. Worst case scenario, I can probably take this off and get a little bit more space, but hopefully I can keep that. I might swap to another hood just because this one's a little beat up, but plans for the future. Intake's on, just a thick bead of silicone at the front. I like putting a little silicone around the water jackets too, but it's bolted down, torqued down, fuel rails are on, injectors are on. Obviously the throttle body is too. I think I can make the factory throttle cable work with this. I'm not 100% certain on that. Next big thing, which you guys will probably see in the next video, is I gotta plumb the fuel lines. Originally I was using the factory fuel rails and it's still gonna be returnless, but I didn't have a fuel pressure sensor, so I'm wiring in a fuel pressure sensor. Waiting on a couple fittings. Apparently the first time I ordered them, I ordered 8 AN, not 6 AN like I needed. So waiting on my 6 AN ones to come in, and then we'll plumb these rails. And then I'm debating relocating my computer. I'm not 100% sure on that yet. The wiring up here, I'm gonna condense, make it a little shorter. And then my factory came off of an Explorer. The steel tube that runs to the back for the heater lines won't work with the fuel rails. So I'm gonna have to go buy some hose and a nipple to put in my intake so I can still run my heat, because I'm not giving up the heat and I'm not giving up the AC. Those two things are gonna be sticking around. I got bored one night. I broke out the good old bathroom scale and found out this upper intake weighed about 25 pounds. So now that I have that Holley intake, I'm probably losing 20 to 25 pounds off of the nose of the truck. Granted, the truck's not much of a race truck, so it doesn't matter a whole lot, but I mean, everyone knows every little bit of weight you can get off of something helps. The next big task, I haven't really been showing anything on video, haven't filmed anything on it, but is my rear end. So my truck, I took out the other leaves and now it's just a mono leaf. So what I'm doing to hold the load is I'm running coilovers. I tried using some factory length air shocks and they mounted way far in. They didn't work very well. The truck wheel hopped really bad. So I'm hoping these shocks help. These coilover shocks from QA1 will help with my wheel hop a little bit. Odds are when I put sticky tires on this some point in the future, you're gonna see a set of cow track bars come out on this thing, because I don't feel like doing a 4-link on this truck. And cow track bars are kind of cheap and easy. And the other thing I'm going to be doing on the diff is I'm going to be ordering new clutches for that. I have a B&M diff cover with torque bolts that I'm going to be installing and rebuilding the posi in that. So more things in the future. Coilovers I'm kind of at a standstill on because they sent me one 10-inch spring and the one 12-inch spring. So we're waiting until parts come in on that too. Already have my cross member cut and marked my center line on both sides so I can drill that for my mounts on my shocks. Just don't want to drill those yet until I have both my coils mounted, so I make sure my coils aren't going to hit my B&M diff cover or hit my frame. I know about where the cross member is going to be. I just don't know how far in I'm going to tilt the shocks yet. With a little bit of luck, you guys will see this running in the next video. I hope to have it driving too, but time will tell on that. I don't have tons of time between school and work, so it is what it is. So if you guys want to see it, make sure to like, follow, subscribe, leave a comment, give me some motivation to get this thing done. I plan to have it at the track and at some Cletus and Cars events, and hopefully that'll be some good content for you guys and you guys will get some enjoyment out of it.